They spilled food on the waitress at table 3. The Mafia boss sat at table 7 and shouted. The rain in Port Mercer doesn't just fall, it attacks. It hammered the plate glass of saffron and steel like it was trying to collect a debt, each drop a tiny silver nail. Outside, the neon from the bar bled onto the wet asphalt and turning the street into a bruised watercolor. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of old wine, espresso steam, and the deep, savory scent of the braised short rib that was our Tuesday special. It was 2 hours past midnight. I am Maya Lark. I am 24 years old, and I live my life in the space between breaths. I count them. It's a stupid habit, picked up somewhere in the wreckage of my childhood, when the noise gets too loud, when the customers get too familiar, when the exhaustion from culinary classes threatens to pull my knees to the floor. I count. Inhale. 1. Exhale. 2. It's a little cage I build around my temper, keeping it from biting anyone. Tonight, I was on breath 712, my feet aching inside cheap black flats, my mind miles away, diagramming the 5 French mother sauces, hollandaise, bechamel, espagnole. I just needed to get through this shift, this month, this year. Pass the chef certification, get out from behind the tray and behind the line, where the food speaks for you and you don't have to smile when you don't mean it. My station was tables 1 through 5 near the window. Table 3 had been trouble since they stumbled in, smelling of cheap rye and entitlement. 3 of them. Suits a little too shiny, laughs a little too loud. They looked like they'd spent the day losing money they didn't have. Now they wanted to make someone else pay for it. I approached with the water pitcher, my eyes already downturned. It's a reflex. Don't make eye contact. Don't be a person. Be a pair of hands. Another round. The one in the middle slurred, not looking at me. And bring my pasta again, while his friend snapped, shoving a half-eaten plate of carbonara at me. It's cold. I knew for a fact it wasn't. I'd pulled it from the window myself less than 10 minutes ago. But you don't argue. Right away, sir. I turned. I didn't see the foot hook out. I didn't see the hand shove the plate. I only felt the sudden, scalding heat as 200 degrees of pasta, pancetta and egg yolk sauce hit my chest. It wasn't just a spill. It was a push, an intentional hurl. The hot liquid soaked through my apron and my white button-down instantly, stinging my skin. The heavy ceramic plate crashed to the floor, shattering. The entire bistro went silent. The soft jazz trio playing by the bar fumbled a note, then stopped completely. Every head turned. The 3 men at table 3 erupted in laughter. Clumsy, the middle one sneered. I just stood there, sauce dripping onto the floor, the heat starting to sear. Humiliation is a different kind of burn. It's cold, and it sinks right to the bone. You gonna cry, little girl? The one on the left whispered. He leaned in close, and I could smell the rot of the alcohol on his breath. You made a mess. He reached out, his fingers greasy, and grabbed my wrist. His thumb slid over my pulse point. Maybe you should stay after, help us clean up. 2. My breath caught. My entire body went rigid. This was the part where I was supposed to shrink, to apologize, to placate, but all I could feel was the throb of his thumb against my skin and the sting of the sauce. Let go! The words were out of my mouth before I could stop them. They were quiet, but they were mine. The man's eyes narrowed, his grip tightened, his fingernails digging in. What did you say to me? I started, but my voice was shaking. That's enough. The voice wasn't mine. It wasn't loud. It wasn't a shout. Not really. It was low, cold, and heavy as a block of granite. It cut through the silence, through the rain, through the fog in my head. It came from table 7. I hadn't even registered table 7. A single diner, back to the wall, in the darkest corner of the room. He'd been there for an hour, nursing a single espresso, as still as the shadows around him. Now, he was looking up. His name was Dante Castellani. I didn't know him, but I knew of him. Everyone in Port Mercer did. You don't work the late shift in this city and not learn the faces of the men who own the night. He was the head of the Halcyon Syndicate. They weren't just gangsters. They were an institution. They had rules. And in Port Mercer, their rules were the only ones that mattered. He wore a suit, but it wasn't shiny like the morons at table 3. It was black, a wool so fine it seemed to drink the light in the room, like looking at deep water at midnight. He looked to be in his mid-30s, his face sharp, sculpted, and utterly unreadable. The music was still dead. My manager, Sal, was frozen by the host stand, a fake, terrified smile plastered on his face. Sal knew the score. He knew the primary Halcyon rule, the one that kept the city from tearing itself apart. You don't hurt innocents on their territory. You don't spill blood. And you don't break things that don't belong to you, especially people. Table 3, in their drunken haze, didn't seem to understand who they were looking at. The one holding my wrist didn't let go. Mind your own damn business, pal. Dante Castellani placed his napkin on the table. He didn't throw it. He placed it. Then he stood up. He wasn't a huge man, not a brawler, but he moved with a terrifying, coiled grace. The entire bistro seemed to shrink around him. He looked at the man holding me, apologized to the waitress. The man laughed, a short, barking sound. Or what? Dante's gaze didn't waver. He turned his eyes to all 3 of them, a slow, appraising sweep. In this city, he said, his voice still that same impossible, quiet level that filled the whole room. If you make a mess, you pay the cleaning bill before you open your mouth. The third man, the quiet one, seemed to sober up. He recognized the face. He kicked his friend under the table, but the one holding my wrist was too stupid or too drunk. "We don't answer to you," the man sneered, and he did the stupidest thing I have ever seen a person do. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a flimsy leather wallet, flipping it open to a cheap tin badge. Federal Organized Crime Bureau. We're on an investigation. A beat of perfect, profound silence. Dante Castellani actually smiled. It was tiny. It was terrifying. It didn't touch his eyes. "FOCB doesn't exist here," and he said, as if explaining to a child. "Clowns." As he spoke, 2 men detached themselves from the bar. I hadn't even seen them. They wore the same dark suits as Castellani. They didn't look at table 3. They didn't look at me. They walked to the bar, put something down, and spoke to Sal. Sal, pale as a sheet, nodded quickly. "Yes, Mr. Castellani, of course." The man finally let go of my wrist. The bravado had drained right out of him, leaving a clammy, gray fear. The 2 men from the bar walked back to table 7. One of them spoke to Sal, his voice loud enough for the whole room to hear. "Halcyon covers table 3's bill, and Miss Lark's shift. She's done for the night." My name. He knew my name. My knees felt weak. I was still standing there, covered in cooling pasta, my skin burning, my wrist throbbing. I was shaking, a deep, uncontrollable tremor that started in my stomach. The men at table 3 were gathering their things, their faces pale, avoiding eye contact with everyone. They threw cash on the table and practically ran for the door, shoving each other to get out first. The room slowly started to breathe again. The jazz trio, hesitantly, started to play softly. Dante Castellani sat back down. He picked up his espresso cup. Then, as if he were an afterthought, he looked at Sal. "Get her a clean shirt from the kitchen, and some burn cream." He was leaving. His 2 men held the door. He walked past my table. I was still rooted to the spot, a monument to someone else's mess. He didn't stop, didn't slow his stride, but as he passed, he turned his head just enough. His voice was so low. It was for me alone, a secret shared in the wreckage. "Don't let them break the way you treat yourself with kindness." Then he was gone, out into the Port Mercer rain, leaving me standing in a puddle of spilled wine and shattered porcelain, the echo of his words hanging in the air, heavier than the storm. The staffroom door swung shut behind me with a tired sigh, sealing me in with the smell of industrial bleach, damp wool, and stale coffee grounds. My hands were shaking. I pressed them flat against the cool metal of my locker. It was locker number 14. I stared at the dent in the corner. Inhale, 1. The adrenaline was starting to fade, and the pain was kicking in. It wasn't just the sting of the heat on my chest, which was already beginning to blossom into a painful, glossy red. It was the other burn, the humiliation, the feeling of being pinned, of being worthless, of being a mess for someone else to clean up. Exhale, 2. Dante Castellani's voice was still in my head. That low, cold command. Don't let them break the way you treat yourself with kindness. Easier said than done. 3. I unfastened the strings of the ruined apron. It was heavy with sauce and water. I peeled it off and let it fall to the floor. 4. My fingers fumbled with the tiny pearl buttons of my shirt. The wet fabric clung to the scalded skin. 5. I bit down hard on my lower lip as the cold air of the room hit the raw burn. 6. I am 24 years old. I am studying to be a chef. I am not the girl who cries in the back room of a bistro at 2 in the morning. 7. I pulled my spare shirt from the hook. It was clean, but it carried the permanent scent of the deep fryer. It didn't matter. 8. I opened my eyes. The shaking had almost stopped. I was in control. I had to be. This job, this second job, wasn't just for tuition at the Culinary Institute. It was for Evan. I pulled my phone from the bottom of my locker. The screen was a spiderweb of cracks. But it worked. No new messages. No calls. Of course not. My little brother. Evan Lark. He was supposed to be the smart one. The one who got us out. He was halfway through his electrician apprenticeship, a trade school that cost more than I made in 3 months. But Evan had a weakness for the glow of a screen, for the siren song of a quick payout. He'd found an online casino, the kind that didn't use dollars. It used crypto. It was fast, anonymous, and bottomless, and it was run by the Orion crew. They weren't like the Halcyon Syndicate. They weren't old Port Mercer royalty with rules about innocence. They were new money, digital ghosts. They didn't have territory. They had servers, and they collected their debts in the real world with steel pipes and blowtorches. I'd been paying the VIG, just the interest, 6 months of it, siphoning every spare dollar I had just to keep them from breaking Evan's hands, just to keep him in that school. Every shift I worked, every plate I carried, was a small wall I built around him. When I stepped back into the dining room, buttoning my clean cuffs, the atmosphere was wrong. The music was playing, but it was hesitant. The remaining diners spoke in hushed tones. And Dante Castellani was still there. He hadn't left. He was sitting at table 7, his back to the wall, nursing a fresh espresso. He was watching the rain as if it were a private movie. My manager, Sal, scurried over, pressing a small tube of burn cream into my hand. It was the good stuff, not from our cheap first aid kit. "He paid for your entire shift, Maya," Sal whispered, his eyes wide, refusing to look directly at table 7. "Double time. It's already in the system." I looked at Sal. I looked at the dark, still shape of Castellani, and I looked at the absolute disaster at table 3. The shattered plate was gone, swept up, but the floor was a Jackson Pollock of pasta, pancetta, and spilled wine. The chairs were pushed back. It was a scar. "Sal," I said, my voice flat, "men like that, Halcyon, they don't do favors for free. Nothing is free." Sal just swallowed, nodding. I turned away from him. I went to the bus station. I got a bucket of hot, soapy water. I got a clean mop. I got 3 fresh rags. I walked to table 3. I could feel Castellani's eyes on me. I didn't look at him. I dropped the rags into the water, wrung one out, and got on my hands and knees. I scrubbed the wine from the hardwood floor. I picked up the stray pieces of pasta. I wiped down the legs of the chair. I mopped the floor until it was clean. Then I went to the linen closet, got a new tablecloth, and reset the entire table. Fresh silver, fresh water glasses, fresh folded napkins. When it was perfect, I took the mop and bucket back. I went to the register. I saw the comped shift, the large tip entered by Sal. I voided the transaction. I clocked out, my shift ending exactly when it was supposed to. I grabbed a clean guest check from the server station and my pen. I didn't write much, just 5 words. I can clean myself. I walked to table 7, and he looked up. His eyes were dark, and for the first time, I thought I saw something in them other than coldness, maybe curiosity. I placed the note on the table beside his cup, face up. I didn't wait for a reaction. I didn't say thank you. I didn't say anything. I just turned, walked to the staff room, grabbed my thin jacket, and pushed through the front door into the wet night. I wouldn't be a debt on his ledger. The bus ride to Dockside Flats was long. The rain had eased to a cold, persistent drizzle that seeped into my sneakers. My apartment building was cheap. Concrete block construction that always smelled like damp salt and fish. I walked down the alley that served as a shortcut, my keys clutched in my fist. A dark sedan was idling at the end of the block. Its lights were off. The engine was just a low thrum, barely audible over the harbor foghorns. I stopped. My heart hammered against my ribs. The car didn't move. It wasn't waiting for a light. It was just sitting there, watching. I forced my feet to move. I didn't run. I walked, key ready, up the 3 flights of stairs to my studio. I shoved the key in the lock, threw the door open, and slammed it shut behind me, engaging the deadbolt in the chain. I leaned against the door, my breath coming fast. Inhale, 1, exhale, 2, paranoia. It was just a car. My old phone, the burner I kept only for Evan, was on the counter. It buzzed. The sound was harsh, violent in the tiny, quiet room. I stared at it. It buzzed again. A text message from a number I didn't recognize. I picked it up. Don't let Evan leave the house on Friday. My stomach hollowed out. I scrolled down. There was no name, just a signature, a single capital letter. Oh, no. I fumbled with the phone. My fingers slipping on the cracked screen, I dialed Evan's number. It rang once, twice, then clicked. Voicemail? Evan, pick up. Call me right now. It is important. Call me. I hung up and tried again. Straight to voicemail. He'd turned his phone off. Where would he go? It was almost 4 a.m. Not his dorm. Not class. Arcade Hollow? The thought hit me like a punch. The 24-hour gaming den 3 blocks from his school. The one that smelled like ozone and stale beer. He said he liked the vintage pinball machines. I grabbed my keys. I didn't bother with the burn cream. I ran back out into the rain, my footsteps echoing in the empty street. The dark sedan was gone. I didn't care. I ran the 6 blocks to the arcade. The neon sign, a flickering blue rocket ship, was dark. The entire place was dark. No, 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 I panted, pushing on the glass door. It was locked. A heavy chain was looped through the handles. A piece of cardboard was taped to the glass, closed for repairs. They were never closed. Never. I backed away. A terrible, cold dread spreading through my chest, worse than any burn. My eyes scanned the alleyway beside the building, and I saw it. On the dark, wet cement of the side entrance, someone had written a message in thick white chalk. The rain was already starting to dissolve it, blurring the edges, but I could still read it. It wasn't a warning. It was a statement. Debt transfers to sister, Friday. I didn't sleep. The chalk message, debt transfers to sister, Friday, was burned into the back of my eyelids. I spent the hours from 4 a.m. until dawn staring at my cracked ceiling, my mind racing, calculating. How much could I get for my textbooks, my knife roll? How many extra shifts could I possibly pick up before Friday? The answer was always the same, not enough, not even close. I showed up for my next shift at Saffron and Steel on autopilot. The morning light was gray and weak, matching the cold dread in my stomach. When I arrived, Sal met me at the door. His face was pale. Maya, something strange is going on, he said, wringing his hands. We're closed this morning, a private booking. What, Sal? I need this shift. I stopped. I couldn't say I need the money or my brother is forfeit. It's him, Castellani. Sal gestured inside. He booked the entire restaurant from 9 a.m. till noon. Said he needed to inspect the kitchens for a private event. My blood went cold. He's here. In the dining room. He just waved me off. Said he just wanted coffee and for the staff to go about their morning prep as usual, but he wants you to serve him. This was it, the other shoe. The price for his favor last night. He hadn't accepted my note. He was here to collect. I pushed past Sal. My hands were steady. Fear does that sometimes. It burns away the small anxieties and leaves a single, hard point of focus. Dante Castellani was at table 7, just like last night. He wore another suit, this one a dark charcoal gray that seemed to absorb the weak morning light. He wasn't looking at the rain today. He was reading a thin, leather-bound book. I walked to the bar, tied on a clean apron, and pulled the portafilter from the espresso machine. It was our old La Marzocco, a beautiful, finicky beast. "It's pulling sour," Sal muttered from behind me, still hovering. "The pressure's off. Been doing it all morning. Don't—" "I know," I said. I didn't need him telling me how to do my job. I dumped the grounds, grabbed a small, flathead screwdriver I keep tucked in my apron pocket, and knelt. I angled my head, listening to the pump engage, a tiny turn of a screw hidden near the valve, a half-degree adjustment. The high-pitched whine of the motor softened, deepened, finding its correct rhythm. I stood up, filled the portafilter, tamped it, and locked it in. I pulled the shot. It came out perfectly, a rich, steady stream of dark crema. I put the small cup and a glass of water on a tray. I didn't add a spoon. I didn't add sugar. I had a feeling he wouldn't use them. I walked to table 7. He looked up from his book as I set the cup down. His eyes were the same color as the harbor water just before a storm. "You didn't need a technician," he observed. His voice was quiet, but it filled the empty room. "Technicians cost money," I said, "and they over-tighten the valve." He took a sip. His expression didn't change, but I saw a flicker of something, approval. "You work here, you go to culinary school, and you're a mechanic." "I just know how machines work," I said, my hand instinctively going to the notebook in my pocket. "What do you want, Mr. Castellani?" "Dante, and I'm here to ensure the standards of the establishment are acceptable." "Our standards are fine. Your friends from last night were the problem." "They weren't my friends." He looked at me. A long, appraising gaze that felt like a physical weight. "The Halcyon Syndicate has principles. Miss Lark, we don't humiliate those who work for a living. We don't harm children. And we do not default on a worker's wages." I almost laughed. It came out as a short, bitter puff of air. "Nice rules, a very civilized code for whatever it is you do. But what do you live on?" "Dante principles." He didn't blink. "I live on keeping my promises. It's a rare currency, and expensive." "Right," I turned to leave. "Miss Lark." I stopped, but didn't turn around. "Your note last night, you were correct to send it, but wrong to assume you were the one being billed." Before I could process that, one of his men, the same ones from the bar, entered the restaurant. He was quiet, but he moved with an urgency that broke the stillness of the room. He leaned down and spoke in Dante's ear, his voice too low for me to hear. But I heard Dante's reply. It was ice. "Orion." My heart stopped. I turned, very slowly. The man nodded, handing Dante a small tablet. "They hit warehouse 18 at the South Docks. Took the whole container." Dante's jaw tightened. He scrolled through the screen. "Just the one." "Just the one. They knew what they were after. They left the others." "They're sloppy, or arrogant, or both." Dante looked up at his man. "No guns in front of civilians. Handle it. I want to know who gave them the manifest by sundown." The man nodded and was gone. Warehouse 18, Orion container. The words were a drumbeat in my head, a rhythm of pure dread. They were closing in. This wasn't just about Evan's stupid bet anymore. As if summoned, my burner phone, the one I kept for Evan, vibrated in my apron pocket. I looked at Dante. He was watching me. His gaze flicked down to my pocket, then back to my face. "You should answer that," he said. "It seems important." I walked away from him, my legs stiff. I went to the empty staff room and pulled the phone out. Unknown number. I answered, Evan, Maya. It was his voice, but it was wrong, distorted, as if he were speaking through a fan or a voice modulator. And he was terrified. I could hear it underneath the digital rasp. Maya, I messed up. I messed up bad. Where are you? Are you okay, Evan? Talk to me. You have to listen, he rasped, the words tumbling out. They said the debt is yours now. They said you have until Friday. Friday, you have to bring the envelope. What envelope, Evan? What money? How much? It's not money. It's an envelope. They just said the envelope. To the neon spire, the parking garage, level 4, 6 p.m., Friday. Evan, I don't know what you're talking about. What envelope? You have to. Maya, his voice broke, the distortion cracking. If you don't, they said they'll stain you, like they stained you at the restaurant. They said they'll clean the table. Oh God, Maya, they were there. They saw it. My blood ran cold. The men at table 3, they weren't just drunk. They were Orion. It was a message. They were showing me what they could do, how easily they could touch me, humiliate me. Evan, get out. Go to the police. No police. Maya, just do it. Please. Neon Spire. Friday. The line clicked, dead. I leaned against the lockers, my body shaking so hard I could barely stand. Stain you. Clean the table, and this was beyond me. This was deep. I stumbled out of the staff room. Dante was standing by the bar now, shrugging into his coat. He looked at me, and I know my face was a mask of sheer terror. I walked straight past him, to Sal, who was polishing glasses, pretending he couldn't hear the world collapsing. Sal, I whispered, my voice hoarse. I need a loan, an advance, everything you can give me. 5,000, 10,000, I don't care. I'll work for free for a year, 2 years. Sal dropped the glass. It didn't break, just rolled on the mat. He looked at me, then at Dante's back, then at me. His face was a picture of pure, pathetic fear. Maya, I can't, he whispered. You saw him. You know who he is. I can't get involved. I have a family. I'm sorry. He wouldn't even meet my eyes. Of course, no one would help. I was alone. I backed away from him. The hard point of focus was back. The terror receded, replaced by a cold, sharp resolve. I pulled the little notebook from my apron, the one where I kept my recipes, my prep lists, my budgets. I opened to a blank page. I uncapped my pen. I wrote 2 words. Don't beg, work. I had to find another way. I had to find Evan. I had to find what this envelope was. Friday. I had less than 48 hours. A difficult position. Dante's voice was right behind me. I jumped, slamming the notebook shut. He hadn't left. He was standing so close I could feel the warmth radiating from him, smell the clean scent of expensive wool and the faint, bitter edge of the espresso. You're in trouble, he stated. It wasn't a question. I'm fine, I lied, my voice tight. No, you're not. You're a terrible liar, Maya. You're transparent as water. He looked at the notebook in my hand, then at my face. He saw the note I'd written. I don't know how, but he saw it. He reached into his jacket. For a second, I flinched. He didn't pull out a gun. He pulled out a business card. It was thick, black, and felt heavy. He didn't hand it to me. He placed it on the bar. The only thing on it was a name and a 10-digit number. No company, no title. You're right not to beg, he said. Begging gets you pity. Pity is worthless. He tapped the card. But when you decide you want to be treated fairly, you call that number? I'll be waiting. He turned and walked out. The door clicked shut, leaving the restaurant in stunned silence. I stared at the card. Dante Castellani. It felt like a trap, a different kind of cage. I snatched it off the bar. I looked at Sal, who was watching me with wide, terrified eyes. I tore the card in half. I tore it into quarters. I let the pieces flutter from my hand into the trash can behind the bar, a gesture of defiance, an act of self-preservation. Sal let out a shaky breath. "Good girl, Maya, don't get mixed up in that." I just nodded. I unhooked my apron. "I'm not feeling well, Sal. I'm going home." I walked out. I didn't wait for him to answer. I got 2 blocks away, my mind already spinning, planning. I had to find Evan. I had to figure out what was in that warehouse. I stopped. I reached into my apron pocket. My fingers closed around the small, flathead screwdriver. And the other thing I'd palmed. When I tore the card, I had only let 3/4 of it fall into the trash. I looked down at the torn half piece in my hand. It was black. It had no name, just a string of numbers. The 555-0100. I kept it. Panic is a luxury. It's an explosion, and it burns out fast. I couldn't afford it. What I had was dread, a slow-burning, cold fire that lives in your stomach. Friday. The word was a deadline. I left my apartment before sunrise. I didn't go to class. I went to Evan's dorm room at the trade school. I still had a key. It was chaos. Clothes on the floor, empty energy drink cans, textbooks unopened. He hadn't been here in days. I wasn't looking for him. I was looking for how he got into this. I found it in the trash, buried under pizza boxes, his Arcade Hollow membership card. I went to the arcade. The closed for repairs sign was still taped to the glass. I went around to the alley. The chalk message was almost gone, washed away by the morning drizzle. But the side door had a security camera, a new one, high-end, not the usual cheap dome. It was aimed right at the alley. Orion wasn't just watching their property, they were watching the chalk. They wanted to see who came to read it. They were waiting for me. I backed away, my hood pulled low, my heart hammering. I ducked into the coffee shop across the street. Their website, Arcade Hollow. It was offline, but the cached version from a week ago mentioned new security upgrades. I clicked the link. The feed was dead. A broken connection. Useless. I sat there, stirring cold coffee, my mind racing. What else? What was unique? The shoes. Evan had 1 pair of good work boots, steel-toed. He was obsessive about them. He'd saved for 2 months. They were gone. But his old ones, the ones he wore for side jobs, were still by his dorm door. I went back. I knelt. My fingers traced the worn rubber soles, and I found it. A speck of color, lodged deep in the tread, bright, almost fluorescent, safety orange. I knew that paint. You couldn't live in Port Mercer and not know it. It was the exact shade being used on the Overlook Bridge refurbishment, the biggest public works project in a decade. The wind on the Overlook Bridge was a physical assault. It screamed, tearing at my jacket, trying to shove me off the narrow pedestrian walkway. It was high, cold, and smelled of rust and the deep, briny water below. Sparks rained down from a scaffold above a bright, golden shower that vanished into the fog, a welding crew. I climbed the access ladder, my hands numb on the cold steel. A foreman yelled at me to get down. I ignored him. I saw her. She was suited up in heavy leathers, a welding mask pushed up on her forehead, revealing a face smudged with soot. Juniper Cade, June. We'd been in the same biology class in high school. She was tough, quiet, and had spent 4 years staring at the back of Evan's head with a hopeless, silent crush. "June," I shouted over the wind and the scream of the grinders. She turned. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Maya, what the hell are you doing up here? You need a hard hat." "Where is he?" I didn't have time for pleasantries. "Evan, he was here, wasn't he?" Her face closed instantly, defensive. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me. June, the orange paint, it's on his boots. He was here." Her resolve crumbled. She pulled me behind a stack of rebar, out of the main path. "He was here," she admitted, her voice low and worried. "Day before yesterday. But he wasn't on the crew. It wasn't official." She told me Evan had come to her, desperate, said he was in trouble. He'd met some guys, the Orion crew. They'd offered him a one-time job. His apprenticeship taught him how to use a forklift. They just needed a licensed driver for an hour. Move some pallets at an old warehouse. No questions asked. and his debt was gone. He thought it was a clean job. Maya, June insisted, her eyes pleading. He thought he was just moving, I don't know, parts. Where? A warehouse, down by the South Channel. He was supposed to load them onto a truck, but he was nervous. He spilled a whole can of that safety paint, just all over the floor of the truck bay. She pointed down the bridge. He was working over there. He said they just loaded the pallets right on top of the spill. They didn't even wait for it to dry. The orange paint wasn't just on his boots. It was on the cargo. It wasn't hard to find. The warehouse was in the worst part of the industrial sector, where the asphalt was more pothole than road. The sign was new. A cheap piece of vinyl bolted to the chain link fence. Civic Logistics Trust. It sounded bland, official. It sounded like a lie. The place was quiet. Too quiet. I didn't try the gate. I walked the perimeter, pretending to be lost, my head down, on the south side. The fence was flush against a retaining wall. If I climbed, I could see the loading bay. I climbed. My fingers scraped against the concrete, but I pulled myself up. The bay was empty, but I could see inside through the filthy, wired glass window of the loading dock. Pallets, dozens of them, stacked high. And on the base of at least 10 of them, I could see it, smears and streaks of bright, unmistakable safety orange. My hands were shaking. I pulled out my phone. The angle was bad. The light was worse. I zoomed in. The pallets were wrapped in black plastic, but the binding straps, the heavy-duty plastic ones, were stenciled white letters, CLT 17. CLT, Civic Logistics Trust. Warehouse 18. Took the whole container. Dante's words from the bistro. This was it. This was the envelope they wanted. Not money. They wanted me to move this, to become the new Evan. I snapped 3 pictures. They were blurry, but the letters were clear. CLT 17. I had the location. I had the proof. And I knew I was being watched. The same dark sedan from my alley was parked half a block down. They weren't hiding it. They were hurting me. I slid down the wall and walked away, forcing my pace to stay even. I couldn't go to the police. Evan was involved. They'd arrest him. I couldn't call the number on the torn card. They were monitoring my phone. I was sure of it. I went to Saffron and Steele. It was mid-afternoon, the dead time between lunch and dinner prep. Sal wasn't there. Good. I walked straight past the bar, into the kitchen. The head chef, Benoit, looked up from breaking down a halibut. He was an old-school Frenchman who owed Dante his job, his visa, and his restaurant. He was halcyon, loyal to the bone. I didn't say a word. I pulled the torn half-card from my pocket. I took a guest check from the service station. I wrote the address of the warehouse. I folded the check around the card and handed it to him. This is for table 7, I said. Benoit didn't ask questions. He wiped his hands on his apron, took the note, and nodded once. I left. I'd done it. It wasn't begging. It was a transaction. I was trading information. I was collaborating. Miles away, in a dark office overlooking the harbor, Benoit's delivery was made. Dante Castellani looked at the guest check. He saw the address. He turned over the torn piece of black cardstock. He smiled. It was the same cold, terrifying smile I'd seen in the bistro. He picked up his phone. "Theo," he said, "I need you to prepare a trust box, anonymized, for the Lark debt. I want it scrubbed. No paper trail leads back to her. I want it legal." I didn't know about that. I just knew the waiting had begun. Friday was still coming. The whispers started that night. I heard them on the bus, at the grocery store. "Did you hear about that waitress, the one at Saffron and Steele?" "Yeah, the one Castellani went after. My cousin's friend works there. Said he beat her half to death, broke her arm. They said she spilled a drink on him, and he just snapped. It was a Ryan, a clumsy, brutal smear campaign. They were trying to break the Halcyon law, trying to paint Dante as a hypocrite, a monster who hurt the innocents he claimed to protect. They were trying to bait him into a war. The city held its breath. Dante did nothing. The Halcyon syndicate was silent. He knew it was a trap. And I knew with a certainty that settled like lead in my bones that he was not coming to save me. This was my problem. Friday. The neon spire. I went to the discount hardware store on Mercer. I bought a 3-inch paring knife. It cost $6.40. I went back to my apartment. I sat on my floor. The handle was cheap, molded black plastic, slick to the touch. I took the roll of white athletic tape I use for blisters from my culinary kit. I wrapped the handle tightly, winding the tape over and over, building a grip that wouldn't slip. Not if my hands were wet, not if they were shaking. I held it. I practiced the grip, not a punch, a slice. How Benoit had taught us to trim a tenderloin. Clean, precise, a tool. I was not a victim. I was not a message. I was a chef. And I was just preparing. It was Thursday night. The city was holding its breath, waiting for Friday. I was at Saffron and Steel, lost in the rhythm of prep. Mirepoix, 2 parts onion, 1 part carrot, 1 part celery. I focused on the knife, the sharp thwack against the cutting board. It was the only sound I could control. The rumors about me and Dante were everywhere now. Ugly and false, whispered by the other servers. Sal wouldn't look me in the eye. The storm, which had been threatening all day, finally broke. The rain came down not in drops, but in solid gray sheets. The lights in the kitchen buzzed, flickered, and died. Total darkness. The prep line went silent. Benoit cursed in French from the walk-in. The dishwasher let out a low whistle. "Breakers tripped again!" Benoit yelled. "Maya, stay put. I'll get the flashlights." I didn't move. The kitchen was black, except for the tiny, steady blue pilot lights on the massive gas range. They looked like lost souls. I was alone in the main prep area, near the back door. The hiss of the rain was deafening. Then another sound, the squeal of the back door hinge, a gust of cold, wet air. I spun around, my hand instinctively grabbing the paring knife I'd tucked into my apron, the one with the white tape handle. A silhouette stood in the doorway, framed against the gray, stormy light of the alley. It was too tall to be Sal, too still to be Benoit. Miss Lark. Dante Castellani. My hand tightened on the knife, but I kept it low, hidden by the prep counter. "We're closed. The power's out." "I see that." He stepped inside, letting the heavy door swing shut, plunging the room back into near total darkness. I could barely see him. Just a shape moving through the gloom, the blue pilot lights reflecting faintly on the wet shoulders of his suit. He stopped about 10 feet away. He was holding something. My thin, cheap jacket. "You left this," he said. He didn't toss it. He just held it out. I didn't move. "How did you know it was mine?" "It smells like saffron and espresso, and you were the only one cold enough to be shivering." I slowly let go of the knife. I walked over and took the jacket from his hand. Our fingers didn't touch. It was damp from the rain, but it smelled of the storm, and inexplicably of fresh coffee. "Thank you," I said, my voice stiff. "Benoit is making me an espresso on the gas flame," he said, as if that explained everything. He didn't move toward the dining room. He stayed in the kitchen, with me. He gestured to the stove. "Mind if I just shrugged. He walked over to the range, holding his hands out over the weak heat of the pilot lights. I stood near the steel prep counter, folding my jacket, needing something to do with my hands. The silence was heavy, broken only by the rain and the low hiss of the gas. "You work too hard, Maya." "I need the money." "For culinary school." "And other things." He looked around the dark kitchen. The steel surfaces gleamed faintly blue. "Why this life? It's hard. It breaks people." "It's honest," I said. "And my mother, she was a chef." He turned his head. I could see the sharp line of his jaw. She worked at Shelter Finch, the community kitchen over on the east side. She cooked for everyone. The kids who aged out of foster care, the old-timers who lost their pensions. I ran my hand over a dusting of flour on the counter. She taught me how to make a veloute before I knew how to read. She said food was the one thing that was never a lie. Shelterfinch, he said, the name sounding strange in his low voice. It's been closed for 2 years. Lack of funding, I said, the words bitter. The city council cut the grant. The building's just sitting there, rotting. My dream, the one I never told anyone, not even Evan, was to get it back, to reopen those doors. And you believe that, he asked, that food is never a lie. I believe it's the one thing that gives people dignity, a hot meal, made with respect. It's not a handout. It's a human right. He was quiet for a long time. If you were to get that building back, he said, his voice speculative, if you were to win it, somehow, a kitchen that size would need operating capital, new equipment, steady supply lines. I just stared at him. What's your point? Halcyon could fund it, anonymously, through a trust no one would ever know. I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. No. Kindness from you is just a debt with a different name. I'm already in too deep in this city. I don't need to owe you, too. It wouldn't be a debt, Mike, he said. It would be an investment in a city that works. You don't know the first thing about... The lights flickered, a single, blinding flash of white that illuminated the entire kitchen. I saw his face, clear as day. His eyes were locked on mine. He wasn't the monster from the rumors. He wasn't the cold boss from Table 7. He was just a man, standing in a dark kitchen. Then the lights died again, plunging us back into the intimate, blue-hued dark. We were closer than I thought. He didn't move, but I could feel the heat coming off him, a stark contrast to the cold air. He slowly lifted his hand, not to touch me, but into the space between us. A gesture. His eyes, now just dark pools, held mine. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. The question was there, hanging in the air. May I? My heart was hammering so hard I thought he could hear it. I shouldn't. This was the man who ran the city's shadows. This was a trap. But he hadn't touched me. He'd asked. I gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. He stepped forward. He didn't grab me, and he was impossibly gentle. His hand came up and brushed the side of my face, his thumb grazing my cheekbone. It was warm. Then he kissed me. It wasn't a rush. It was slow, tentative, a question. I tasted espresso and the storm. I stood frozen, my hands clutching my jacket. Then he deepened it, just slightly. A spark ignited, a low, slow heat that had nothing to do with the stove. My breath hitched, my hands unclenched. One of them found its way to his suit, grabbing the expensive lapel. His other hand slid from my face, down my neck, and came to rest on my back. It was broad and firm. It pressed against the thin fabric of my shirt, and I felt my spine shiver, a jolt that went straight through me. He gathered my hair in his hand, pulling it back from my ear, his fingers careful. He pulled back, just an inch. Our foreheads rested against each other. I could feel his breath, warm and steady, against my lips. Okay, he whispered. His voice was rough. I didn't trust my voice. I leaned in, my leg brushing against his. My other hand came up, resting on his chest. I could feel his heart, a steady, powerful beat beneath my palm. It was an answer. He took it as one. He kissed me again. And this time there was no question. It was slow, and then it was deep, and then it was slow again. It was the most deliberate, controlled thing I had ever felt. He wasn't taking, he was listening, responding to the tension in my shoulders, the way I leaned into him. The kitchen was silent, but in my head, it was deafening. The heat from the gas range was at my back, and his heat was in front. The windows were fogging over, sealing us in. I was shaking, and I wasn't cold. Just as the kiss was about to break, to become something else, something I wasn't ready for, he stopped. He pulled back. He kept his hands on me for a moment, steadying me. Then he took a full step back, breaking the contact, leaving the air between us charged and cold. I stared at him, breathing hard. When you choose, Maya, he said, his voice low, when you are not running from something or trapped, when it is your choice, I will be there. My hand was trembling. I looked down. My fingers were still clutching the paring knife. No, not the knife. I had dropped the knife. My hand was on his wrist. His cuff was slightly pulled back from when he'd held his hands to the flame. A scar, a thin, white line that cut diagonally across the inside of his wrist. It was old, but it was deep. I touched it. My fingertip traced the raised, pale skin. He didn't pull away. He just watched my face. "What?" I whispered. "A trade," he said. His voice was flat. "To keep a kitchen from being robbed. The owner was a friend. He didn't want to pay protection. So they sent men to burn it down during service." I looked up at him, shocked. I offered them a choice, the kitchen or my hand. My breath caught. They chose, but they were bad at it. He shrugged. A tiny, elegant movement. "They're not in business anymore. The kitchen is—" I stared at the scar and then at his face. The man who would trade his own flesh to keep a kitchen open. I finally understood. "So you know how to cook. The law," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "And I cook food." I met his gaze. The fear was gone, replaced by that cold, hard point of focus. "Maybe we can cooperate." Friday, 6 p.m. The words had been a death knell all week. The Neon Spire parking garage was a concrete tomb. The air was cold, damp, and thick with the smell of unburned gasoline and old urine. Every sound my own footsteps, a drip of water from a pipe overhead. The distant hum of the ventilation system echoed, amplified, and distorted. The lights were a sick, buzzing sodium orange that made everything look diseased. I was on level 4, as instructed. My heart was a fist, beating against the inside of my ribs, but my hands were steady. I reached into my bag and pulled out the white pastry box from Benoit's kitchen. It was light. I'd packed it myself. 12 miniature cannoli, dusted with powdered sugar. Tucked beneath the wax paper lining was my old burner phone. I'd charged it all night. I hit the record button, the screen glowing for a brief second before I buried it under the pastry. It was recording audio, a tiny red light blinking. It was a stupid plan. It was the only plan I had. I clutched the box in my left hand. My right hand was in my jacket pocket, wrapped around the white-taped handle of the paring knife. A car engine roared, the sound bouncing off the walls, and a set of blindingly white LED headlights rounded the ramp. A low-slung, obnoxious electric sports car, the kind that whispered its wealth slid to a stop 20 feet away. The music was loud, a thumping, repetitive beat that rattled the concrete. The driver's door opened. He didn't just get out, he emerged. He was young, maybe my age. He wore a ridiculously expensive-looking silver bomber jacket, designer jeans ripped at the knee, and bright white sneakers that looked stupid in the grime of the garage. He was all flash, all surfaces. This had to be Dax Orloff. He left his music playing. "Well, well, well," he called out, his voice slick with arrogance. He sauntered over, flanked by 2 larger men in dark hoodies who fanned out, their hands in their pockets. The little waitress. "I was wondering if you'd show." He stopped a few feet from me, looking me up and down, a sneer playing on his lips. "You look scared. You should be." "So, where is it, the envelope?" I held up the pastry box. Dax actually laughed, a high, barking sound that echoed, "What is this?" "You're kidding me. Write a snack." He looked at his men. "She brought us a snack." "It's not money," I said, my voice surprisingly level. "You didn't ask for money. You asked for the envelope. I don't have it." His smile vanished. "Don't play games with me. My people saw you at the warehouse. You know exactly what we want. Hand it over." "I don't work for you," I said, "and I don't have your shipment. I came to talk about my brother." "Oh, your brother," Dax scoffed. "Your brother is collateral. He's the down payment. You're the one who pays the bill. Now, give me the manifest." "I don't know what you're talking about." He took a step closer. "The pictures you took, the location, the manifest for CLT-17. You're going to give them to me, and then you're going to finish the job your idiot brother started." "No." His eyes went cold. Wrong answer. He nodded at one of his men. The man moved fast. He lunged for me. I didn't think. I reacted. As his hand grabbed my arm, I ripped my right hand from my pocket. I didn't aim for him. I didn't try to stab. I used the knife as Benoit taught me. A quick upward slash, not at his flesh, but at the space right in front of him, at his wrist, designed to break his grip. The blade, a 3-inch sliver of steel, flashed in the orange light. The man yelled, more in surprise than pain, and recoiled. Stumbling back, he wasn't cut, he wasn't bleeding, but he was shocked. In that 1 second of hesitation, I threw the cannoli box. It hit Dax square in the chest. Pastries and powdered sugar exploded everywhere. The burner phone clattered to the concrete floor, the red recording light still blinking. "Grab her!" Dax shouted, wiping sugar off his silver jacket, his face contorted with rage. The second man was already moving. Then, from the stairwell 2 levels down, a sound, a siren, not a police siren, but a federal one. That deep, European whoop-whoop sound. Dax froze. His men froze. "What is that?" Dax hissed. A phone buzzed. The man I'd slashed at pulled his out. His eyes went wide. "Boss, we got a problem. There's feds on level 2. They're raiding the chop shop." "What feds?" Dax yelled. "There's no feds in Port Mercer without Halcyon knowing." "They look real," the man stammered. "Badges, vests, FOCB. Federal Organized Crime Bureau, the fake agency Dante had mentioned. The clowns." It was a diversion. Dante wasn't here to fight. He was here to herd. Dax was rattled. He was losing control. He looked at me, at the phone on the ground, at the stairwell. "It's just vitamins," he suddenly shouted, his voice cracking. "It's not even a real bust. The entire container, CLT-17, it's just legal drugs with a mislabeled manifest. It's a fine. It's not a raid." He'd said it. He'd admitted it. My hand tightened on my knife. I took a slow step back, toward the phone. "It doesn't matter," Dax growled, recovering. "You're not leaving." He advanced on me. "You brought this on yourself." "Let her go." The voice came from the shadows, from the ramp behind Dax's car. Dante Castellani. He stepped out of the darkness. He was alone. He wore no jacket, just a crisp white shirt, the sleeves rolled to his forearms, and dark trousers. He looked like he'd just stepped out of an office, not a war. Dax spun around. "Castellani, you're dead. The rumors. My guys said you were—" "Your guys lie," Dante said, his voice quiet, but it filled the garage. He didn't look at Dax. He looked at me. "Are you hurt?" "No," I said. "Good." Dax laughed, though it sounded strained. "It's 3 of us, old man, and 1 of you." "The math is off," Dante said. On cue, from the shadows between the concrete pillars, more shapes detached themselves. Not 2, not 3, at least a dozen. Men in dark, simple clothes. They didn't carry guns. They just appeared. They flanked Dax, cutting off his escape routes, silent as water. Dax's men raised their hands instantly. Then, the final move. One of Dante's men wheeled a small cart forward. On it was a portable, battery-powered projector. He aimed it at the flat concrete wall of the garage. He switched it on. An image flooded the wall, bright and clear. It was a split screen. On one side, my blurry, orange-streaked photo of the CLT-17 pallet. On the other side, a crystal-clear shipping manifest, a real one. It listed the contents not as vitamins, but as unregulated precursors. They hadn't just found the warehouse. They'd found the proof. Dax stared at the projection, his mouth open. His flashy, arrogant mask was gone. He was just a kid, caught. "You're being shamed, Dax," Dante said, his voice almost gentle. "In front of your men, you're sloppy, and you broke the rules." I stepped forward. I picked up the burner phone from the floor. I stopped the recording. All eyes turned to me, even Dante's. "I have what you said. I said to Dax, my voice shaking but loud. The whole thing, you admitting the mislabeled containers. I looked at Dante, and I have him, on tape, threatening me, threatening my brother. I turned back to Dax. This was my trade. You delete Evan's debt, all of it. You let him go. You never, ever contact him or me again. You leave us alone. Both of you, I said, looking from Dax to Dante and back. In exchange, I held up the phone. I give this to Mr. Castellani, and he can decide whether to give it to his friends at the FOCB. Dax was trapped, Halcyon on one side, a fake federal agency on the other, and me in the middle with the only piece of evidence that mattered. He stared at me. The hatred in his eyes was pure, undiluted. Fine, he spat. The kid's debt is gone. He's clean. Say it, I demanded. Evan Lark, his debt is cleared. We're done. I walked over to Dante. I didn't hand him the phone. I held it out. He looked at me. A long, unreadable expression on his face. He understood. This was my power. He nodded. I turned and threw the phone. It skidded across the concrete and stopped at Dax's pristine white sneakers. My part is done. I said, now go. Dax snatched the phone. He looked at Dante. This isn't over. Old man, this is my city, too. The Sea Light Festival. I'm going to burn your docks to the waterline. Dante just watched him. Dax and his men scrambled back into the car. The tires squealed as he reversed, almost hitting a pillar, and then sped down the ramp, the thumping music fading into the concrete. The garage was silent again. Just me, Dante, and his quiet, shadowy army. I let out the breath I'd been holding since I saw the chalk. My knees buckled. I didn't fall. Dante was there. He caught my arm. His grip was firm, steady. I'm fine, I whispered, pushing away, standing on my own. I know, he said. He looked at the paring knife still clutched in my hand. He looked at the mess of cannoli and powdered sugar on the floor. You didn't have to come, I said. Yes, I did, he replied. I keep my promises. He didn't take me home. His driver, a silent man who seemed to be part of the car itself, drove us away from the neon spire, away from the city center, and toward the cold, sprawling darkness of the South Docks, toward Warehouse 18. You traded information, Dante said from the darkness of the back seat. His voice was calm, the adrenaline of the garage already gone. I'm completing the transaction. You need to see what you were trading for. The warehouse wasn't just guarded by Orion. It was staffed by them. But they were gone. Dante's FOCB shadow raid had cleared them out. Now, his own men stood at the perimeter, not in suits, but in the simple work jackets of longshoremen. He led me inside. The air was frigid and smelled of damp cardboard and a strange, sharp chemical sweetness. He used a crowbar to pry open one of the wooden crates marked CLT-17. It wasn't cocaine. It wasn't guns. It was thousands of foil-wrapped blister packs, garish, brightly colored labels, all in Russian and Korean. Vitamins, I said, picking one up. Black market supplements. Unregulated, Dante corrected. Worth a lot to bodybuilders and health fanatics, but not a narcotic. Not enough to bring the real feds down here, but the manifest Dax was using, the ones he admitted to. He called them precursors, I whispered, remembering. He was faking manifest to look like he was moving something much heavier, trying to inflate his reputation, trying to draw heat. He gestured to the vast stacks of crates. But this is just junk, and he was using the dockside loaders, paying them triple time in cash to move it, using them as a human shield. If a real bust ever came, the workers would be the ones arrested, while Dax and his crypto wallets vanished. The dock workers, I said, understanding. They wouldn't know. They'd just see a paycheck. He's poisoning the well, Dante said. He's making the working men of this port complicit in his lie, and that I cannot allow. So what now, I asked. You'll destroy this. No. He turned to face me. the single overhead security light carving his face out of the shadows. This isn't my property. And a war, a real war, hurts everyone. It closes the port. It stops paychecks. It starves the very people we're trying to protect. Dax wants a war, I said. He threatened the Sea Light Festival. He wants a spectacle, so we'll give him one, but not the one he's expecting. His plan was audacious. It was pure Port Mercer politics. He wouldn't fight. He would expose. The fish market, he said. Tomorrow, 5 a.m. The Port Mercer Dock Workers Guild holds their morning meeting before the auctions. Every loader, every welder, every crane operator is there. It's the only real parliament this city has. You're going to... What, just tell them? I am going to present the evidence. The 2 manifests. The product. I'll have a few of the men who were hired by Orion speak. We will hold a public trial, and we will let the guild decide who is telling the truth. I saw the flaw. They don't trust you. Dante, you're Halcyon. You're the suits. They're the boots. They'll see it as one boss trying to muscle out another. He knew I was right. His silence was the admission. And in that silence, I saw my opening, the promise from the dark kitchen. You need a negotiator, I said. Someone they trust, someone who isn't you, someone who is one of them. He watched me, his gaze sharp. Me, but not for free. My heart was hammering. This was the real trade. I'll be your voice. I'll get them to listen. And in return, Halcyon funds the emergency reopening of Shelter Finch. Not a promise, not a future investment, funded by the time that meeting starts. He studied my face, looking for a bluff. He found none. You're leveraging me, Maya. I'm collaborating, I said, using his own word. You want the port, I want the kitchen. They're both full of hungry people. He gave a single, sharp nod. Theo Stroud will have the papers drawn up by midnight. You'll have your kitchen. Evan was sitting on the steps of my apartment when I got back. He looked small and broken. The swagger was gone. He just looked like a kid. My kid brother. He stood up when he saw me. Maya, I heard in the garage, I'm so sorry. I didn't hug him. I didn't yell. I was too tired. I just unlocked my door and walked inside. He followed, a ghost in my shadow. I ruined everything, he whispered to the floor. I'll quit the school. I'll get a job at the fish gutting. No. My voice was flat, hard. I was done with weakness, his and my own. You're not quitting. Here's the new deal. Evan, you're going to electrician school. You're going to go every single day. You're going to get the best grades in your class. And at night, you're not going to arcades. You're coming with me. He looked up, confused. Where? To Shelter Finch. I'm reopening it. You're my new prep cook. And my new wiring expert. You'll work for free, every night until I say we're even. You'll chop vegetables and you'll fix the circuit breakers. You'll work by day and you'll work by night. You'll pay this back with your skill, not your pity. Are we clear? For the first time in a year, I saw the real Evan. He stood up straight. He looked me in the eye, and he nodded. Clear, Maya, Okay, yeah, I'll do it. Before dawn, I stood in a circle of 36 of the toughest men I'd ever seen. The fish market was loud, smelling of ice and brine. The auctioneers already warming up. The guild leaders, their faces carved from years of sea wind. Listen to me. I didn't talk about Halcyon. I didn't talk about Orion. I talked about Shelter Finch. I talked about a hot meal for their kids. I talked about a place that wasn't a bar, that wasn't a racket, but was just for them. Then I told them that the funding had been secured that night, anonymously. This is what Halcyon offers, I said, my voice ringing in the cold air. Not protection, not a turf war, a promise. Now, Dante Castellani wants to show you what Orion is offering. They looked at each other. The oldest one, a man named Finn, nodded once. We'll listen for the kitchen. They sided with the law, the decent one. Dante kept his word. At 9 a.m., a pale, razor-sharp man named Theo Stroud met me at a coffee shop. He slid a folder across the table. It was an anonymous trust, fully funded, naming a holding company I'd invented as the sole beneficiary. Shelter Finch was mine. The victory lasted 3 hours. That's when the video dropped. It was everywhere, sent from an anonymous number to every phone in the bistro, every supplier, every member of the guild. It was security footage from the saffron and steel kitchen, the night the power went out. But it was wrong, chopped, edited. The lights didn't just flicker, they were cut to black. The long, hesitant moments were gone. It was just me. And him, the kiss, cut and spliced, looked violent, his hand on my back, cut to look like a shove, me grabbing his lapel, cut to look like I was pulling him in. It was a lie, a filthy, disgusting lie that made me look cheap. And him like the monster the rumors had claimed he was. My phone blew up. Disgusted texts, Sal asking me not to come in. The shame was scalding. I went to the bistro, not for my shift, but for him. He was there, in the back office with Benoit, and he was terrifying. I had never seen him angry. I had only seen him cold. This was different. This was a white-hot, silent rage that seemed to suck the air from the room. He wasn't talking. He was just looking at his phone. "I want him," he said, his voice a low vibration. "I don't care about the festival. I don't care about the guild. I want his head." No. He looked up. He didn't seem to see me. "Maya, leave. This is not your part of the business." "You do that," I said, stepping into the office, "and you prove him right. You prove that video is true. You become the animal he painted you as. He put his hands on you. He violated. He used our..." He couldn't even say it. "He used a lie," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "And you want to answer it with a bullet? What's the difference? We fight this with the truth, or we've already lost." "The truth is slow," he ground out, "and this is fast." "Then we'll be faster." I looked at Benoit. Sal has the full footage, doesn't he? The master files from that night, not the edited clips, the whole thing. Benoit nodded slowly. He keeps a separate backup, for insurance. "Good," I said. "Then we're not having a war. We're having a fundraiser." Saffron and Steel was packed. We'd sent out the word an emergency fundraiser for the newly reopened Shelter Finch. The whole city came. The guild, the suppliers, the media, the gawkers. They came to see the circus. They came to see the waitress from the video. At the end of the bar, someone had a phone. They were playing Dax's fake video on a loop. People were watching it, then looking at me, whispering. I wasn't a waitress. I was in the kitchen, in my chef's whites. I was cooking. My mother's New England chowder, a massive pot of it. The smell of bacon and thyme and clean cream filled the room. Dante walked in. The room went silent. He looked at the crowd. He looked at the phone playing the video. He didn't make a speech. He didn't pull a gun. He walked to the bar, unbuttoned his suit jacket, and handed it to Benoit. He took off his $1,000 watch and his cufflinks. He rolled up his sleeves. He walked behind the line, past me, to the deep, 3-bay dish pit, which was already overflowing. And in front of the entire city, Dante Castellani started to wash dishes. He scrubbed, he rinsed, he sanitized. He worked without stopping. A few minutes in, he paused. He looked out at the room, at the stunned faces. He didn't look at me. "This world, our world, is a frightening place," he said, his voice just loud enough to carry. "And men like me, we are the reason." He picked up another stack of plates. "I apologize for making it so..." He bowed his head. And then Sal, his face pale but resolute, walked to the bar. He unplugged the small TV that usually showed the game. He plugged in a laptop. The bistro's security system, and it records everything," Sal stammered, "in case of insurance." He hit play. It was the full, unedited footage from the dark kitchen, the entire 10 minutes. The room watched. They saw the flicker. They saw him holding my jacket. They saw the long, quiet conversation. They saw him lift his hand and wait. They saw my nod. They saw the kiss, slow and gentle. They saw him ask, "Okay." They saw him pull back. They saw him take a full step away, giving me space. The silence was profound. Then someone started to clap. It was Finn, the old guild leader. Then another and another. Soon, the whole room was applauding. Dax's lie had been burned away by the simple, clean, slow-moving truth. Dante didn't look up from the sink, just kept washing the dishes. I turned back to my pot. I picked up my ladle. "Chowder's ready," I announced. $10 a bowl for the kitchen. The fundraiser at Saffron and Steel had been a victory of truth, but it was just one battle. The war for Port Mercer and for my own life was still cold, and it was still waiting. The money we raised, combined with Dante's silent, anonymous trust, was enough. 2 days later, Shelter Finch opened its doors. It wasn't pretty. The paint was fresh but cheap. The floors were scrubbed but permanently stained. The equipment was all second-hand, donated by other restaurants Benoit had strong-armed, but it was clean. And the old gas range, the heart of the kitchen, roared to life with a satisfying whoosh that I felt in my chest. Evan was there. True to his word, he'd already rewired the main breaker box and fixed the sputtering walk-in cooler. I spent the day making a vat of food so large my arms ached. A rich, smoky, chili, slow-simmered with beef I'd bought at the fish market auctions, and a mountain of cornbread. It was food for the forgotten. As the sun went down, they started to arrive. The teens who aged out of the system, the ones living in the alleys and under the bridge. They were wary, their eyes hard, expecting a catch, a sermon. I just handed them a bowl. "Welcome to Finch," I said over and over. Dante arrived late. He didn't use the front door. He came in through the kitchen, silent as a shadow. He wore his dark suit, a stark contrast to the utilitarian white of the room, and he looked utterly out of place. He just stood by the door, watching. He saw the line of kids. He saw Evan serving cornbread. He saw the way one of the girls, who couldn't have been more than 16, took a bite and her whole body relaxed, attention she'd probably held for years, just releasing. "You did it," he said, his voice low. "We did it," I corrected. I was covered in flour and tomato sauce. "Are you going to stand there and look pretty, or are you going to work?" I threw him a towel. "They're done. We need to clean." He took off his jacket, folded it carefully over a steel counter, and rolled up his sleeves, revealing the white scar on his wrist. He didn't wash dishes this time. He grabbed a bus tub and started clearing tables, scraping plates, stacking bowls. He worked with a silent, focused efficiency that matched my own. We cleaned the entire kitchen together. Evan and June, who had volunteered, had left an hour before. The kids were gone. The shelter was quiet. I was in the dry storeroom, heaving a 20-pound bag of flour onto a low shelf. The air was cool, smelling of clean, dry goods paper, dusty potatoes, and sharp, hanging bundles of dried mint. I turned, wiping my hands on my apron, and he was there, blocking the doorway. He had just been standing there, watching me. "They were fed," he said. For one night, I was tired, my body humming with the good ache of hard work. "It's more than they had yesterday." We were close, in the narrow aisle between sacks of rice and cans of tomatoes. There was nowhere else to be. The single bare bulb overhead cast long shadows. He reached out, not to my face, but to my apron, and gently untied the strings at my back. "You're done for the night, Maya." I let the apron fall to the floor. Underneath, I was just in a t-shirt and jeans. He didn't move away. He stepped closer. He lifted his hands, but he didn't touch me. He just waited. Then, slowly, he leaned in and rested his forehead against mine. I closed my eyes. I could feel his breath, warm and steady. It smelled of the night air, of coffee. My hands, still dusty with flour, came up and rested on his chest, on the crisp, white cotton of his shirt. I could feel his heart, a slow, strong, steady drumbeat. It was the calmest thing in my life. My fingers found the first button of his shirt. It was hard, made of pearl. I didn't unbutton it. I just traced its edge. Then I moved to the second button. My fingers were trembling, just slightly. I was fastening and unfastening my grip on the fabric, a nervous rhythm, like a heart trying to decide. He was perfectly still. He was letting me lead. He was giving me the choice he had promised. I took a slow breath, inhaling the scent of mint and flower and him. Then I tilted my head up and kissed him. It was an answer. It wasn't the hesitant question in the saffron and steel kitchen. It was a statement. He met me halfway, and the kiss was deep and slow, and it was everything. His hands, which had been at his sides, slid up my back. They were warm and strong. They settled on my lower back, only on my lower back, and he pressed, pulling me flush against him. There was no space left between us, just heat. My knees went weak. I clung to his shirt. A shiver ran up my spine, a delicious electric jolt. He kissed my jaw, my neck, his lips tracing a line up to my ear. His breath was hot. I could feel the curve of his collarbone, a hard, elegant line beneath my hands. His jacket, which he'd retrieved from the kitchen, was still slung over his arm. It slipped, falling to the dusty floor with a soft thud. My own thin cardigan followed. The warmth wasn't just on my skin, it was inside me, a deep, radiating heat, like a coal that had finally been given air. He pulled back, just an inch, his forehead resting against mine again. His eyes were dark, his breath uneven, matching mine. More, he whispered. The word was rough, a question that held a dozen others. I didn't answer with a word. I smiled, a small, real smile. I reached past him, my hand grabbing the thin, cheap cotton curtain that covered the storeroom's small wire-glass window. I pulled it shut, plunging us into a soft, intimate darkness. We didn't talk for a long time after that. We just sat on the sacks of potatoes, the scent of mint and dust around us, learning the shape of each other in the quiet. I want to open my own place one day, I whispered into the darkness, after Finch is stable, when this is over. I felt his hand find mine. What would you call it? Lark and Ember, I said. A small place, just a few tables, real food. He was quiet for a moment. I'll be your first reservation. I'll pay full price, and I'll tip 20%. I laughed, a soft, breathy sound. You'll wait in line with everyone else. Castellani? I felt his smile in the dark. Yes, chef. It was a bubble of peace, and like all bubbles, it was made to burst. We walked out of the storeroom, our hands still loosely clasped. Evan was gone. The kitchen scrubbed clean. But something was wrong. The front door, the one I had just painted a bright, hopeful blue, was open. A piece of paper was pinned to it with a steak knife, a knife from my own kitchen block. Dante was in front of me in an instant, pushing me behind him. He pulled the knife from the wood and took the note. It was a postcard, a cheap, glossy picture of the Overlook Bridge at sunset. I took it from him. I turned it over. 5 words were scrawled in an ugly, jagged hand. The sea swallows the kitchen. Dax, Dante breathed. His voice was no longer warm. It was ice. The Sea Light Festival, I said, the pieces clicking into place. He's going to do it. Burn your docks. He's going to burn something on the bridge. Dante nodded, his face a mask of cold fury. The city's main power conduit. It runs under the east walkway. If he starts a fire, a container fire, something big and hot, it'll melt the lines. It'll cut power to this entire district for weeks. It would kill Finch. It would kill my new restaurant before it was even born. It would plunge the neighborhood into chaos. We have to stop him, I said. No, Dante said, his voice absolute. I have to stop him. You need to leave. I'm getting you out of the city. Tonight, I can have a car here in 10 minutes. You'll be safe. I looked at him, the man who had just held me, the man who was already trying to hide me. No, I said. Maya, don't be a fool. This is my fight. He's coming for me. Through you. Let me handle it." "And how will you handle it?" "Dante, in the middle of a festival with 10,000 people, are you going to have a gunfight on the bridge?" I shook my head, the anger rising, cold and clear. "This is my kitchen," he threatened. "This is my neighborhood. He's going to black out." I turned to Evan, who had just walked in, his face pale. "The generator, the backup." "It's old, Maya," Evan said, his eyes wide. "The switch is manual. Someone has to be there to throw it, and the panel is on the service platform, under the bridge." "Then we'll be there," I said. "We'll be a target," Evan argued. "They'll see us." "Not if they can't see," I said, the plan forming, fast and sharp. I looked at June, who had followed Evan. "June, we need something that glows, something waterproof, something we can attach to the switch." June caught on instantly. "A float, a small buoy, battery-powered. I can weld a cage for it. We can tie it right to the breaker handle." "We'll do it tomorrow," I said. "Before the festival. We'll attach it. When Dax cuts the power, the entire port will go dark, and we'll be the only ones who can see the light." "This is insane," Dante said, grabbing my arm. I pulled away. I faced him. "If I run, I stop being me. I'm not that girl at table 3 anymore. Dante, I'm not the girl who hides. I won't be another person you have to protect. This is my city. This is my fight. We do this together, or I do it myself." He stared at me for a long, silent moment. The boss, the killer, the man who owned the shadows, and I did not back down. He let out a slow, frustrated breath. He knew he had lost. He knew he had met someone as stubborn as he was. He didn't say okay. He didn't agree. He just held out his hand. I took it. His grip was strong. Mine was just as strong. And for the first time in this whole terrifying mess, neither of us was shaking. The Sea Light Festival was the one night Port Mercer pretended to be beautiful. Thousands of paper lanterns, each holding a small, flickering candle, were set adrift on the Mercer Cut, a slow-moving river of light that wound its way through the old industrial canals. The entire city was out. The docks were packed with families, food stalls and music. The air smelled of salt, fried dough, and wood smoke. It was a perfect, fragile piece. And Dax was about to set it on fire. Dante and I stood on the roof of a low warehouse, overlooking the main canal. His men were ghosts in the crowd, invisible. Evan, June, and I had set our plan in motion hours ago. Under the cover of dusk, June had shimmied down the bridge pilings and attached her custom-made buoy to the massive breaker handle. A small, waterproof LED in a steel cage, tied off with a fishing line. Evan was stationed in an old watchman's shed with a direct view of the buoy, binoculars in hand. "It's starting," Dante said. He wasn't looking at the lanterns. He was looking north. A column of thick, black smoke was beginning to climb into the night sky, staining the stars, the north warehouse. "A diversion," I whispered. "A panic," he corrected. "He wants to draw the city's emergency services away from the bridge, away from us." Sirens began to wail in the distance, cutting through the festive music. People in the crowd were starting to point, their voices rising in alarm. Dante didn't move. He pulled a small two-way radio from his pocket. "Now." A block away, a red on-air light glowed in the window of a tiny independent radio station, Dockwave, the community station, run out of a converted shipping container that every worker on the port kept on in their trucks and homes. Dante's voice, low and calm, crackled to life over the airwaves. I could hear it echoing from a radio at a food stall below us. "To the workers of Port Mercer," he began. There was no introduction. "This is Dante Castellani. There is a fire at the North Dock. It is a distraction. The real threat is to the Overlook Bridge, to our power, to our homes." The crowd below, hearing his name, went quiet. The music stopped. "The Halcyon Syndicate was founded on one vow," Dante continued, his voice wrapping around the worried city. "We do not harm the innocent. We do not disrupt the work of the port. We protect our own. Tonight, Orion seeks to break that vow. They seek to bring chaos to your homes and darkness to our streets. We will not let them. My men are unarmed. We are not here to fight. We are here to protect the light. It was a declaration of peace, a public renunciation of war. He was cornering Dax. A roar from the water. A black speedboat, low and shark-like, cut through the paper lanterns, its engine screaming, its wake swamping the tiny lights. Dax was at the helm, his face illuminated by his dashboard, a mask of insane fury. He was heading straight for the bridge. He had 2 other men with him. They were holding large, red cans of accelerant. He's not even hiding. I breathed. He's desperate, Dante said. Just as the speedboat neared the first pylon, another boat appeared, a heavy, official-looking Port Authority cutter, its blue lights flashing. It cut Dax off, blocking his path. "This is FOCB, Shadow," a voice boomed over a loudspeaker, magnified and official. "Your vessel is in violation of an immediate environmental safety hold. We have reason to believe you are carrying hazardous materials. Cut your engine. Prepare to be boarded." Dax's men looked at each other, then at Dax. This wasn't what they signed up for. A turf war was one thing. A federal environmental bust was another. This meant real prison, not just a fine. Dax screamed at them, but it was too late. One of them held his hands up. The other pointed back to the dock. The psychological trap had sprung. The speedboat sputtered, slowed. Dax, enraged, spun the wheel, but he wasn't giving up. He rammed the boat against a small, mossy service ladder leading up to a secondary catwalk, one I hadn't even known was there. His men scrambled off, running back toward the crowd. But Dax was coming up. He saw me, he saw Dante, and he started climbing. "Maya, get back," Dante ordered, pushing me toward the roof access door. No. Before we could move, the world went black. A concussion, a deep thump from under the bridge, followed by a shower of sparks. The music, the lights, the stalls, the entire city. Gone. Plunged into absolute, terrifying darkness. The only light came from the thousands of paper lanterns on the water, and the now raging fire to the north. The crowd screamed, a real collective cry of panic. "Now, Evan," I shouted into the void. I looked at the water. There. A single, bright green pinprick of light, glowing steadily under the bridge, June's buoy. "He sees it," Evan's voice crackled over the walkie-talkie I held. Wait, Maya, I see it. He's at the panel." A second later, a massive clang echoed across the water, and the lights of Shelter Finch, a block away, blazed to life. One building, bright and defiant in the total blackout. The kids, who we had gathered inside for safety, let out a massive cheer, a sound so loud it carried over the water. The panicked crowd stopped. They saw it, the light that hadn't gone out. Dax was on the roof. He was panting, his face streaked with soot. He saw the lit-up kitchen. He saw me. "You," he roared. He didn't have a gun. He just had his rage. He lunged and grabbed my arm, yanking me away from Dante, pulling me toward the edge of the catwalk. "Dax, let her go," Dante shouted. No one beats me." Dax was dragging me, his fingers digging into my arm like claws. "I'll throw her in the cut." Dante stepped forward, his hands raised, open, empty. "You don't want her. Dax, you want me." I want it all. Dante didn't bring a gun, and he brought a piece of paper. He pulled a folded document from his pocket and threw it on the catwalk at Dax's feet. "What is this?" Dax snarled, his grip still on my arm. "That," Dante said, his voice calm, "is a trust. It contains all of it. The real manifests for CLT-17, the proof of your mislabeling. My friends at the FOCB don't have it. The Dockworkers Guild does." Dax froze. "It's an insurance policy, Dax," Dante continued, stepping closer. "Held by Finn and the Guild. If I break my promise, if Halcyon uses violence, if we hurt a worker, if we touch any innocent civilian, they release it. They'll turn on me. They'll ruin me. I've given them the gun to point at my own head. That is the new law." Dax was trapped. He looked from the paper to Dante, to me. He was breathing hard. He had lost. I looked him straight in the eye, the man from the garage, the man who had humiliated me. "You're afraid," I said, my voice cutting through the tension. "You're more afraid of that piece of paper than you are of a bullet. You're afraid of the light." It broke him. With a roar of pure, childish rage, he yanked me, hard, trying to spin me toward the edge. He slipped. The catwalk was slick with moss and river spray. His expensive, stupid white sneaker found no purchase. His weight shifted. His grip on my arm was iron, but his balance was gone. He was falling, and he was taking me with him. I didn't panic. I didn't pull. I did what Benoit had taught me 100 times with a heavy, scalding pot. Don't fight the weight. Redirect it. As he pulled, I rotated my wrist outward, snapping my elbow up, using his own momentum against him. It's a simple kitchen maneuver to escape a hot handle. His fingers, locked in a simple grip, couldn't hold on. My arm popped free. I was free. He was falling. Dante lunged. He wasn't lunging for Dax. He was lunging for me. His arm wrapped around my waist like a steel band, pulling me back, spinning me away from the edge, shielding me with his own body as we crashed onto the hard metal of the catwalk. We watched Dax hit the pylon, scramble and fall, not into the water, but onto the low-slung service platform 10 feet below. He landed hard. The wind knocked out of him. He wasn't dead. He was just finished. Before he could move, he was surrounded, not by Halcyon men, by the guild. Finn, the old dock worker, stepped out of the shadows, followed by a dozen others. They had seen it all. They had seen Dax grab me. They had seen Dante, unarmed. They had seen Dax fall, defeated by his own aggression. "It's over, boy," Finn said, his voice like gravel. He looked up at Dante, then at me. "The guild accepts the terms." He pointed at Dax. "He violated the code. He touched a citizen. He threatened the port. He's done." They surrounded Dax, pulling him to his feet. No violence, just a heavy, silent communal judgment. Dante and I stood up. He was breathing hard. He kept his hand on my back, refusing to let me go. As if on cue, a series of bright white flares shot into the sky from the bridge, the backup teams, signaling. In the sudden, brilliant light, I could see the whole scene, the dark city, the bright kitchen, the paper lanterns still drifting on the water, a river of hope. Port Mercer breathed. A few weeks can change a city. Shelter Finch was alive. The anonymous trust Dante had established, managed by Theo Stroud, was its heartbeat. The kitchen, once silent and rotting, now steamed with the scent of fresh bread, simmering stock, and roasted vegetables. I was in the bakery section, my hands deep in a mound of high-gluten dough, kneading with a practiced rhythmic push, turn, fold. Evan was on a stepladder by the walk-in, installing a new, high-wattage outlet for the industrial mixer. He was whistling. June, now my official sous chef, was at the steel prep table, her knife a blur as she broke down a case of onions. Not a single tear in her eye. And Dante was outside. I'd see his reflection in the window, a dark suit standing across the street by the harbor railing. He never came in during service. He never interfered. He had given me the kitchen, and he was honoring the fact that it was mine. He was a patron, not a king. The city itself had shifted. The Dock Workers Guild, with Finn at its head, had ratified the Dockside Compact. It was a new law for an old city, a set of rules that every power, new or old, had to sign. No violence against civilians, no disruption of the port. Community spaces, like Shelter Finch, were designated as neutral, protected ground. Halcyon had signed it first. The Orion crew, broken and scattered after the festival, had fractured. Dax Orloff, humiliated and defeated by his own aggression, had been deposed by his own people. He was gone. The rumor was he'd fled to another coast. Civic Logistics Trust had been dissolved, its assets absorbed by a legitimate shipping company now under the Guild's watchful eye. The cancer had been cut out, and the wound was beginning to heal. That night, Dante and I stood on the pier, watching the tide come in. The air was cold, but the silence between us was comfortable. "Theo has a place prepared," he said quietly, not looking at me. "Upstate, a small cottage, just for a few months until I'm sure every last rat from Orion's ship is gone." I stopped walking. I watched the dark waters swirl around the pilings. And what I hide, I run. I become the girl you've tucked away for her own safety. "I want you safe, Maya. It's the only thing I care about." I turned to face him. "I thought we were past this. I'm not the girl you protect. Dante, I'm the girl who stands with you." I touched his arm. "Safety isn't a place. It's not a cottage upstate. It's the person standing next to you." He looked at me for a long time, the harbor wind pulling at his hair. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the ingrained instinct to shield and possess, at war with the man he was becoming. He finally let out a slow breath. He didn't agree. He just accepted. He knew I was right. We both knew the risk wasn't gone. It just had a different name. The opening night of Lark and Ember was 6 weeks later. It was my dream, made of reclaimed wood and old brick. It was small, only 20 seats. The sign June had welded for me was beautiful, a thick piece of lumber, the edges charred black, with the words Lark and Ember and the stylized shape of a songbird taking flight burned into the grain. The room was glowing, warm, and packed. I was in the kitchen, a space no bigger than my old studio apartment, but it was mine. I plated the first dish, my mother's New England chowder. The circle was complete. The door chime rang. Dante walked in. He wasn't the boss. He wasn't the owner. He was just a customer. He was seated at table 5 in the corner by the window. He caught my eye through the pass. He raised his glass. I nodded back, my heart too full to speak. The service was in full swing. The dining room was loud, full of laughter and the clink of silver. I was running. "Evan, fire 2 short ribs," I called out. He was helping me on the line, a favor for opening night. "Fire," he called back. I needed to restock the bar. I hurried down the short hall to the dry storage and breaker room. I smelled it first. Before I even saw it, that sharp chemical tang, ozone, the smell of burning dust on a hot wire. I stopped. The lights in the hallway didn't just dim, they stuttered, a rapid, sickly flicker that I hadn't felt since the night of the festival, right before the bridge went dark. This wasn't an accident. I walked back into the dining room. My heart was a cold stone. Dante was already on his feet. He had seen my face. He knew. "Everyone," I said, my voice projecting, calm and clear. "Pardon me. We seem to be having a small issue with our gas line. I need to ask everyone to please finish their drinks and evacuate calmly." The room quieted. People started to move, confused but compliant. Dante was already at the door, his presence a silent, authoritative force, guiding people out. I ran back to the breaker room. He was there, Cade Dorn, a halcyon man, a face I'd seen on the periphery, one of Dante's button men. He had a crowbar wedged into the main electrical panel, prying at the casing. Sparks were showering the concrete floor. "Get out of here, waitress!" he snarled, not looking up. "This is boss's business." "You're going to burn us all alive," I said. "That's the point, a message." The boss went soft, forgot that fear is how you keep a city. He was trying to short the whole building, to start a fire that would gut my restaurant. He'd sold us out, sold Dante out, for money or pride. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I grabbed the heavy, red CO2 fire extinguisher off the wall mount. He finally looked up, his eyes wide. "Don't be stupid." I aimed the nozzle at the panel and squeezed the handle. A blast of icy, white gas exploded from the horn, enveloping the panel and Cade's arms in a cloud of freezing fog. He roared in pain and surprise, stumbling back, his hands burned from the cold. I dropped the extinguisher. I grabbed the main breaker handle, the one that controlled the whole building. It was massive, stiff. I threw my entire body weight onto it. With a heavy, final thunk, the restaurant went black. The building was safe. Cade shoved past me, scrambling out the back door, heading for the fire escape to the roof. Dante met me in the hall. He grabbed my shoulders, his eyes scanning me for injuries. "Are you—" "He's on the roof," I panted. The look on Dante's face. I had seen him cold. I had seen him calculating. I had seen him passionate. I had never, ever seen this. This was rage. He went up the stairs, taking them 3 at a time. I was right behind him. The roof was dark, lit only by the glow of the city. Cade was trapped, backed against the ledge. Dante advanced on him, not like a man, but like a force of nature. "You broke the compact." Dante's voice was a low vibration. "You threatened a protected space. You threatened her." "She made you weak, boss," Cade spat, holding up his burned hands. This law, it's a joke. The city respects blood, not kitchens." Dante picked up a length of rebar left by the construction crew. He was shaking. This was it. He was going to break his own rule. He was going to execute this man on my roof. He was going to become the animal Dax had tried to paint him as. I stepped forward. Dante. He froze. He didn't look at me. I put my hand on his shoulder. His muscles were stone. "Don't," I whispered. "Don't let him take this from you. Keeping your promise is your strength, not this." I felt the war inside him, the long, agonizing second where the old boss fought the new man. He dropped the rebar. It clanged on the gravel, loud in the sudden silence. He looked at Cade, his face filled with a cold, profound disgust. He took out his phone. "Finn," he said, "I have trash on the roof of Lark and Ember. He broke the compact." He listened. "Exile." Agreed. He put the phone away. He grabbed Cade by the shirt and dragged him to the stairwell, where 2 massive dock workers were already waiting. They took Cade. No more violence. Just a silent, heavy judgment. He would be gone from Port Mercer by dawn. The restaurant was empty. The opening night was a disaster. But we were safe. An hour later, Dante and I stood in the dark dining room. The only light came from the amber glow of the bar. I walked up behind him and wrapped my arms around his waist. Pressing my face into his back, I just held on, feeling the steady rise and fall of his chest. He turned in my arms, pulling me against him, his hands tangled in my hair, his forehead pressed against mine. We just stood there, breathing. "You're safe," he whispered, his voice rough. "We're safe," I corrected. He kissed me. It wasn't the slow question from Saffron and Steel. It wasn't the desperate fire from the storeroom. It was deep. It was short. It was solid. It was a foundation. He pulled back, and I was smiling. He smiled back, a real, unguarded, tired smile. Port Mercer will always have its shadows. It will always be a hard city, built on steel and salt, but the rules are different now. I know that ever since that night at Saffron and Steel, one thing has changed for good. If someone spills food on the waitress at table 3, table 7 will stand up. And the entire city will finally see what real strength looks like, the kind that knows restraint, the kind that knows how to keep a promise, the kind that knows how to love. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'm so curious where you're tuning in from. Please comment below and let me know where in the world you're listening, and share your thoughts on Maya and Dante's journey. Don't forget to subscribe to Mafia Boss Stories, like this video, and give us a little extra support by hitting that hype button to help this story be heard by more people.